I got all I want, and I got all I need, and I got everything. I got you and me. All I want, I got all I need.
Marriage is the best. Hey, welcome back to Marriage is the Best. I am absolutely flabbergastedly exhausted today. We've had a week. It has been a week from the deepest, darkest depths of the worst places that you can think of. Exhaustion, fatigue, sickness, health, all the things. It was awful. So here we are on late Sunday night when I usually am recording, and we're just going to go for it. There was no time to prepare, no time to write, no time even to really think. But I have some things that I want to talk about, and we're just going to kind of see how it goes, and we're not even going to do that much editing because there's just not that much time in the day. There really isn't that much time in the day to do all the things that need to be done, to take care of all of the children's needs emotionally, educationally, cognitively, physically, to take care of all of those needs and a sick spouse and the household, the finances, the taxes. There's just not enough. There's not enough of anything to go around. But here we are. We are back. We're going to power through. We're going to get this episode recorded and out because I don't know, it's important. I really love marriage. I love marriage. I love my marriage. I love your marriage. I love marriage as a concept. I love marriage as an idea. I love how marriage challenges us and grows us and is so hard some weeks. I love how marriage was designed in this kind of almost like the American system where there's checks and balances and different personalities of different departments and how those things kind of force it to, force it to work not that well, whatever that word is. And how it not working all that well creates kind of a safety in the system where it's not going to go too far one way or the other. And when it relates to marriage, right, like basically what I'm saying is the way that the man is designed and the way that the woman is designed is in some ways a check and a balance for the extreme parts of the man being checked by the woman, and then the extreme parts of the woman being checked by the man. And if you look at the data of, two-parent households and how successful and well-rounded and helpful and long-term those kids just turn out, they come out of it with different skills and different abilities. And that's really because of the need of the two parties, the man and the woman. Two parties connected, joined together, trying to figure it out. And if that's the best model for two people, for a family, maybe a family of many people, maybe our family of 7, if that's the best model for, a micro scale, I think that it is with a lot of those micro dynamics, those little building blocks that would make a community healthy and on a larger scale, a city or a state or a country healthy, is to look at the smallest building blocks and make those things the most healthy that they can be. And so marriages, being that micro scale, being the small unit, the atom, if you will, in the body, if those atoms are healthy, those small parts, then the whole body can be a healthier functioning thing. So we're going to be talking a little bit about today. We're not going to be talking about today, but today we're going to be talking a little bit about extramarital relationships. And yes, I mean, all of the things that you think of when you think of extramarital relationships, whether it be adultery or affairs, all the different kinds of affairs. And then there seems to be a never-ending creative exploration of other ways that you can completely mess up the structure of a marriage. You can completely destroy the foundation of what makes marriage work. And I think that people are always looking for ways out of their marriage. Now, I think that culture is oftentimes in a self-seeking, selfish, self-centered. All three of those probably mean the exact same thing, but I'm just on a roll. Here we go. In that sort of vein, right? I think culture is constantly pushing the envelope in marriage away from what it makes it work. Culture might say, try to spice things up with other people in your marriage. And that is a cultural message that is so against the reality of what makes marriage work and what sustains a marriage over time. But it gets into people's heads, it gets into people's psyches, and it creeps into people's behaviors. Like I've heard of swinging communities, and obviously these people are not very seriously pursuing their marriages, nor do they understand maybe the destructive power of their behavior. But it is cheap thrills, essentially. But the problem with it is that the culture is lying that it's cheap. It's not a cheap thrill. It costs you everything eventually to step out on your partner, even with their permission, which is another thing in culture that is becoming more popular, is giving your spouse permission to step out on you. That could be done in an ethical manner is, in my mind, in my eyes, absolutely preposterous. It makes no sense. Just, logically, it doesn't. It makes no sense ethically, morally. It is immoral to sleep with someone who is not your partner in the context of your marriage, period. It's just wrong. There are so many systems. There's my sick wife. There are so many systems in play that are broken by individuals attempting to step out of their marriage and sleep around. Just like it's incredibly destructive for young people to sleep around, and hookup culture is obviously ethically and morally wrong. And obviously the ethical, the moral, it's a little bit more difficult to nail down than the physiological, biological, relational, scientific. I think that they're all clear and they're all pointing in the same direction. But I think people are finding ways around the ethical and moral mandates that would point them away from the direction of extramarital relationships in order to serve themselves. And people can get really creative in their ethics. They can get real creative in their moral standing, their moral choices. And I think ultimately it ends in the destruction of the self. Because oftentimes people are seeking to do what they want in the moment. They're seeking expediency when in reality they should be pouring into something that is meaningful. They're seeking short-term gain and short-term pleasure and sacrificing long-term intimacy and long-term success. So extramarital relationships. Ultimately, it doesn't add up. And we're going to talk through a little bit of things that just kind of fly in the face of the idea of extramarital relationships in any form. If you really look at what makes marriage work, and we continue to pursue those things, there are some pretty obvious cultural practices that kind of fly in the face of marriage stability and sustainability. Long-term extramarital partners, short-term, mid-term, long-term, extramarital partners break down the core functionality, the core foundation, the foundation of any marital system. So let's start. Let's start with trust and commitment. Okay, so one of the core features of a healthy marriage is a sense of commitment. Commitment is one of those things that's supposed to grow slowly over time. You know, like kids these days will enter into a talking phase. And really when they talk about talking, they really just mean, you know, taking pictures of themselves or taking pictures of the room that they're sitting in and sending it back and forth. So they're talking, kind of. And, you know, through that stage, there's not a whole lot of commitment. There's, literally no commitment until someone says something to the effect of, hey, let's I'm only going to talk to you. So there's like an exclusivity to it. There's a commitment essentially to the talking part of it. And, you know, if you look at culture, they even understand that if you say, hey, I'm only talking to you, and then you're not only talking to this person, there's a problem with that on an ethical level. There was some outcry recently about some influencer guy who was talking to 11 different women and telling each of them that he was only talking to them. And there was this huge outcry against this individual surrounding their behavior and just the ethical, the moral implications of this person. This kind of person, this kind of behavior is reprehensible. It's inappropriate. It's not becoming. And so they were appropriately, you know, pointed at in the town square of ideas and said, hey, that's inappropriate, that's wrong. Lots of people had thoughts and feelings on it. But that's just the talking phase. Right? That is literally the lowest level of commitment that you can have with anybody. It's just talking to them. I guess not talking would be a form of lower commitment, but that's not even a relationship, so it doesn't count. So in the talking phase, we can understand that if you're telling someone that this is exclusive, right, and you're going outside of it. Now, is it the fact that you're lying in that stage? Right? Is it the lie that's unethical, or is it the actual talking of lots of different people? I don't know. You could bring up a question on both. I think that obviously the lie is the most egregious part of the ethical, you know, breakdown within that. But I also think ethically there's something wrong with flirting and engaging and schmoozing and connecting with lots and lots of different people. And I don't think that necessarily sets you up for long-term relational health, you know, which we're probably going to continue to talk about into the future. I say all that just to say that commitment, we get that commitment is a part of a relationship and that it is a part of marriage. A marriage without any commitment is not a marriage that you can even work on. If you're not committed to your partner, there's no reason for you to come into my office and ask for help if you're not committed to them. And it's my job in part to come to you and to say, hey, because you're not committed to your partner, I'm not willing to enter into a counseling relationship with you because I'm not going to, you know, futilely enter into a counseling relationship where I'm working diligently on something that you're not committed to. And so I let some of those people go. If I am screening them properly, I'm screening them in part for commitment, because marital commitment, the commitment over the course of a relationship, is an incredibly important piece. And it's a foundational piece. It builds up trust. It builds up intimacy. It builds up long-term happiness and success and satisfaction. Without commitment, there really isn't a relationship. Without a commitment, you're just talking to 10 different people all at the same time. And essentially, you're just getting out of each of those 10 different people as much as you can so that you can feel good about yourself, so that you can get maximum pleasure in maximum cases. And ultimately, it breaks down and it leads to less pleasure and less satisfaction. It leads to less health, physical health, mental health, emotional health. It leads to a decreased capacity for long-term success in relationships into the future. And if we just take the example, right, of this like talking phase and how the kids are doing it these days, we can apply the principles that we're talking about in commitment to the talking phase. We can apply it to the dating phase, right? If you're exclusively dating someone, and then you're also dating lots of other people. I'm not talking about going on dates. I'm not talking about going on first dates or second dates with a few different people at the same time. I actually have no issue with that, as long as the people involved know that you're doing that and you're being honest about that. However, if you're being dishonest, obviously there's a moral ethical problem there. And if you're trying to effectively pursue relationships, then dating lots of different people and building commitment with lots of different people at the same time, right? It's not going to work. It's not going to function well. It's not going to lead you to having a strong, healthy, happy, long-term relationship. It is through commitment to a person, just one, that you are eventually going to find that long-term happiness, right? And so commitment outside of the marriage context is so, I feel like it's so clear. Like when you think about all these different stages and you think about your sons and daughters and what you would like them to experience in their dating and what you would like them to experience, along the course of their, like the development of their relationships, you want them to experience a person who is committed to them, who they can build trusting, lasting relationship. And even if the relationship eventually ends and they're not the right person, you still would want that person in their commitment to be trustworthy. You would want them to be committed. You would want them to be honest. You would want them to be, ethical, moral. You would want them to have treated your son or daughter, especially, your daughter, with the utmost of respect. And talking to people all at the same time, or dating people all at the same time, or being engaged with lots of people, or being married with lots of people, or sleeping with a lot of people in any of the phases of relationship is not a way that you want any of your children to be treated in relationship, which is a reflection of the moral, ethical failure of that system. So the principle applies across all stages of relationship. Extramarital relationships, they don't work. They don't function well. They don't build up trust. They don't build commitment. And it is like poison in the well. And actually, here's what I think usually is happening in this, within the trust and commitment area, is people across time, they experience hardship in their marriage. And what happens is, over time in your marriage, you start to create a back door. So this back door is something that you go to when you're really angry with your spouse, when you're frustrated with them, when you're feeling disconnected, when you can't get through, when you're feeling hurt, misunderstood, etc., right? And if you continue to feed that back door, if you continue to feed the escape button, the easy button, if you will, to just go nuclear, to leave, to step out, to step away, the stronger that back door becomes, right? Especially if you're not taking care of your relationship, the stronger that back door becomes, the more strongly you will be tempted to make moral, ethical decisions that you wouldn't want your children to make, nor to make toward them, that you would want, one of their many, many partners. Oh boy. You wouldn't want their spouses to make toward them, because you would know from that perspective that it would be wrong, and it would be hurtful, and it would break them. So this back door comes into play, and we start in the pain of marriage, in the suffering of marriage, that it is inevitable, that comes to all of us. Even though it's the best, it is still incredibly difficult, and there's lots of suffering involved, and self-sacrifice, etc. You create this back door of selfishness, and it's almost that same sense or spirit that we were talking about when we're talking about turning toward someone or turning away from them. It's this inclination to turn away. It's an inclination to say, I don't want to lean in toward you because I'm angry or frustrated or bitter or resentful. And instead, I'm going to turn away. And in turning away, we create this back door in our minds. Okay. And it's the back door that says, I am not going to act in a committed and trustworthy manner. And all that it takes is someone to come up to that back door and to knock. All that it takes is for you to go up to that back door and crack it open. And it creates this rift in the foundation of your marriage that is easily exploited by someone who is probably also hurting, also suffering, or who just is also selfish and pleasure-seeking, in order to create the dynamic of pulling away from and exiting out of, emotionally, exiting out of, physically, exiting out of, financially, exiting out of your relationship. So when someone decides to create an extramarital relationship, there is destruction to the quality of the commitment of the relationship. Now, here's a critical voice. Here's a critical voice that says, or a voice with a different perspective. Okay, well, what if me and my partner have decided that we are going to do this together? Like, this is something that we are choosing together. Okay, so then it's not immoral because we've given consent to this. It's not unethical, right? Because we've given consent to this. It's not necessarily going to eat away at our commitment or our trust for one another, because again, we've talked about it. We're honest about it. We've both confirmed the reality of what is leading us to need to do this. And therefore, all of the arguments against this are wrong, and we should be able to do what we want, and then they move forward and engage in their antics. The reason that doesn't work is because the trust and commitment system is not necessarily a conscious system that you are consciously in control of. It is not a system that you get to tell what to do. You don't get to just walk up to your commitment system and say, hey, we're going to be okay. We are going to be okay with my partner sleeping with somebody else or bringing someone else into our bedroom. And we're not going to let it bother us, and we're not going to be anxious about it. And we're already miserable. And so what's the worst that could happen? And so you need to be okay with this. It doesn't work. It doesn't work no matter how much coaching you get from you or your spouse or another party or another marriage that's doing it, or the swinging community, or the other cultural forces that want to pull you away from the sustainability in your marital system. None of them are telling you the truth, not even yourself. You may not be telling yourself the truth, because the truth is the trust and commitment system cannot function with lots of extramarital relationships. it can't function with one extramarital relationships. Marriage requires two committed people fumbling through, suffering through together. And the funny thing about the numbers, when you look at, like, so let's say that a lot of people who are doing this are out for sexual gratification. And let's just say that the aim, right, is for them to be fulfilled in their sexual relationship. They're not getting that in their marriage, and so they're stepping out, or they're getting permission from their spouse to step out, or whatever, right? They're creating this kind of, scenario. The funny thing about it is that the statistics bear out what I'm saying. Statistically speaking, the people who have the most intimate, most sensual, most successful, most satisfying sexual experiences are people who are married. There are people who are married, and there are people who are married for a long time, over time. It's not the people who are single and sleeping with the most number of people that are satisfied in their sexual relationships. It's just not the case. So, on the topic of sexual gratification, you are going to be more satisfied in your life and in yourself and in who you are by being committed to sex with your spouse and with your partner, and not choosing to go outside of your relationship to seek out those things. So when you have sex, any sort of sexual contact with someone, you release chemicals in your brain. And, we all know this, and chemicals in your brain is like a buzzword in our culture. We talk about chemicals in the context of everything, especially in my field. Chemicals is, I think some people really want to reduce us basically just to chemicals. That's probably a philosophy out there. If you know what it's called, you can feel free to let us know. But it's one of those things that is something. It's an important reality to acknowledge. It's an important reality, especially for young audiences. So when you have sexual contact with someone, your brain releases oxytocin and vasopressin. And the role that oxytocin is it's like a bonding agent. It's a trusting agent. Essentially, what your body is telling you, what you're telling your body to release when you're doing this, is trust. It really is a trust chemical. And so you're saying, hey, body, this is somebody that I really trust. This is someone who is trustworthy. This is someone who is valuable in my world. It's someone who I can bond with. The bonding and trusting happens again on an unconscious level. These chemicals don't care who you're having sex with. They are being released no matter what. And so no matter who sexual contact is made toward, it's a weird way to say it, those bonding, trusting chemicals are being produced. And there's an awesome book on this that kind of talks through the brain science on sex. It's great for education. If you've got like an older adult, not an older adult, but like a budding adult, someone that's coming into their adulthood, and they need the education surrounding understanding sex, understanding how their body is impacted by sex. It's actually a really great resource. And the book is called Hooked, and the byline is the brain science on how casual sex affects human development. So it's written by Joe McElhaney and Frida McKissick-Bush. And it's a good read. It's a good read. It definitely helps to understand how oxytocin and vasopressin mold your brain, kind of mold it and hook it onto the person that you're engaged with the sexual contact with. And they point out that molding process is is it's passive. It's something that happens regardless of who you're actually sexually in contact with. And it's a very powerful force. And so when you mess with that powerful force, right, and you tell your body, hey, trust, bond, chemically connect myself to this person, and then you practice breaking those bonds by not actually being in a relationship with them, and then you go back and do it again, right? So you hook yourself back up. You're connected. You're releasing all of these chemicals, trust, bond, right? Euphoria, connection, and then you walk away, and all of a sudden, right? Like you're walking away and breaking those connections. You told your brain, your conscious brain made a choice that told your subconscious brain, hey, this is a person that I can be intimately involved in. This is the person that I trust. This is a person that I'm bonding with. Let's bond our whole brain and being. And the more that we do that, the more bonded we are. And there's consequences for that. You know, just like there's consequences for sex generally. There's consequences in the areas of sexually transmitted infections or sexually transmitted diseases. There's consequences on so many levels. You know, there's consequences emotionally. There's consequences physiologically. There's consequences in my mind. There's consequences spiritually to the spirit of that person. There are consequences to sexual connection, to sexual gratification, to sexual contact with another person. So physiologically speaking, when you're bonding, right, your body with someone who is outside of your marriage for whatever reason, or being sexual outside of your marriage, you're releasing those chemicals. And regardless of how you've coached yourself, regardless of what sorts of conversations you had with your spouse prior to making that choice, those chemicals are going to bond you to the person. They're going to wire your brain. They're going to impact the way that your brain functions. And there's no amount of pretzelry, which is a new word, coined it here today. Here we go. That is going to circumvent the impact on your brain when you choose to be sexual with someone outside of your marriage. There's no free lunch. I mean, I think kids eat free on Tuesdays some places. But other than that, I think that's dinner actually. Never mind. No free lunch. There is no free lunch, especially when it comes to sexual contact. Now, here let's shift from marriage to other sexual contacts, right? Contexts. What if we were to talk about like sexual assault? If sexual assault was just physical, if it was just a physical body being forced on another physical body, and that's all it was, there wouldn't be a deep, resounding, there wouldn't be this crazy ripple effect that would touch people's lives for decades and decades after the impact. I have talked to so many people who have had an inappropriate physical sexual moment, right, lasted less than a minute and affected them the rest of their lives. One moment of sexuality. And then we have the audacity to say that if we get permission from our spouse to step out of our marriage, that's going to be somehow okay for the rest of our lives. And not only are we going to do that once with one person and regret it for the rest of our lives and go back and confess and repent and redeem our marriage. No, we're going to create a culture that encourages you to step out of your marriage over and over and over again with as many people as to make you happy, only to later say, to pull the rug out from underneath people who are miserable and say it was all a lie. These things connect really clearly in my brain. You know, it is not without consequences that we enter into that, no matter who you've talked to, and no matter how much coaching you've had, and no matter what your counselor says, and no matter how you're, no matter what books you're reading, and no matter who you're listening to in the culture that says it's okay, they're lying to you. It's all a lie. Moved up. Another context, sexual context, that really drives this point home is affairs. Affairs are so destructive. They're crazy destructive. And yes, part of the destruction in an affair is the fact that it was hidden in a lie. And so culture has said, hey, let's take the lie out of the affair. I don't know who's saying this. I don't know who culture is. I've never talked to him. But they're saying, hey, let's take the lie out of the affair, and then it's a good thing. Think about that, right? Like, that's what culture is saying. They're saying you can have extramarital relationships out in the open, and it's not unethical, and it's not immoral, and you can do it as many times as you'd like. Well, maybe they don't say that. Maybe 6 or 7 is too much. Maybe that's like the line. Maybe that would be frowned upon. I don't know. I don't make the rules here. But the culture is saying, hey, if we take the lie out of this, which is obviously unethical, we can agree with that. But we proceed by lying to ourselves and not telling the real story surrounding trust, commitment, physiology, biology, and emotions. That story that's being written and told in your relationship and in your marriage, that story is only going to orbit what is going to be impacted by the way that you're writing it, no matter what. And you don't get to choose some of these things. We don't get to choose some of these things. We don't get to choose how having sex with another person outside of our marriage impacts us. We get to choose whether we do it or not, and we don't get to choose the impact. We get to choose to step out. We get to choose who we do that with. We get to choose all sorts of different things surrounding that. But the impact, the ripples that tear through people's lives, the lives of their spouses, the lives of their children, the lives of their families, the lives of their communities, because affairs don't just touch people. They don't just touch the people involved. There are so many ripples. So when adultery happens, it is obviously incredibly destructive, hurtful, wounding, breaking, etc. It sucks. I've walked many, I don't know if I could say that. How many is many? I guess it depends on how many is many. I don't know if I could do many. Let's just do many people who have experienced lots of different kinds and types of affairs, and they are all extremely painful, and they're all extremely destructive. And so part of creating a sustainable marriage is also creating a marriage that doesn't involve affairs, even affairs that are given the green light by your partner. So this messaging, it's so sneaky. It's so gross. The messaging is so gross. I'm not talking about people. I'm talking about the messaging around this. It is so gross that there are such lies in people's worlds, wherever you're hearing this stuff. Don't go on TikTok, I suppose. But it is so, the lies are so gross. And they don't work. It's not functional. It doesn't work. Okay, let's move on. Other things that make marriage work would be your emotional connection with your spouse. When you choose to have casual sex outside of the context of your marriage, or choose to casualize, brand new word, there we go. When you decide to casualize sex within your marriage, you're creating a pattern or a habit that could lead, very, very easily lead to emotional detachment, heartbreak, diminished ability to form strong, trusting connections. So our ability to form, to bond, to attach to our spouses is greatly impacted by our sexuality. So to say that we can have extramarital partners, extramarital connections, and remain connected to our spouse is a little bit foolhardy. It's a little bit broken, right? When young people decide to engage sexually and bond with, bond and trust with an individual in their world, and then they, break it apart and they do it again, and then they break it apart and then they do it again, and then they break it apart and they do it again. Not only is there physiological, biological impacts to that, but there's also obviously deep emotional, relational impact. And part of that is in one's ability to just connect with someone, period. After telling your body to connect and trust and engage and mold to this person, and then breaking that promise, that you made to yourself, breaking down those chemicals that you made, breaking down the connections that the chemicals created when you made the choice. And then you do that over and over and over again. You degrade your ability to associate sexual connection with emotional longevity, with emotional connection at all. And that breaks down. It breaks down your ability to connect. And so if your hope is that you are going to have like satisfied, intimate, connected relationships, your best bet is to pick a person, commit to that person, engage with that person, and move through the ups and the downs and the goods and the bads and the hards and to learn sustainability. Maybe listen to some podcasting, if you know what I mean, in order to pursue your spouse and to maintain your connection. But if you choose to connect yourself with lots of different parties, especially as a young person, you're going to greatly degrade your ability to connect with a spouse long term. And again, culture's not telling you the truth about it. They're not. They're just lying to you. And it's a convenient lie. It's a convenient lie because it plays to your most basic version of yourself. It plays to the most carnal version of yourself, the most basic, not like, I don't know if that's even, basic. That's a word. Part of yourself. It plays to the part of yourself that wants it to be true. It's one of those lies that you want to believe because it means that your behavior, that you can choose to behave in this way and be okay. And it's not that I'm saying that you cannot be okay if you've had lots of sexual partners, and I'm not saying that you should feel ashamed of yourself if you have. I'm not saying that if you've made mistakes that you're irredeemable. I'm not saying that if you've been divorced and then, got remarried or are searching, that you're dirty or bad or wrong or inappropriate or any of those things. But I am saying that these choices have really serious consequences and that a sustainable marital system will not sustain itself with extramarital relationships on board or off board, anywhere they are, really. It's not a sustainable system. It breaks down, and lots of people want to lie to you to tell you that that's not the case and that you can do it and not have to pay very, very, very dearly for a very, very, very long time. So yeah, that's our episode for today. Thanks so much for listening. If you like this kind of content, feel free to let me know. We have a group on Facebook, Marriage is the Best, because it is. That's not the name of the group, but it is part of the name of the group. You can join that if you would like. We do polls sometimes, and it's a good group. Sometimes Becca writes funny things in it. Sometimes we share memes in it. We have an email. No one has ever discovered our email, but I'm pretty sure that that's not true. We do get one. We have an email. You can write us an email. You could say just hi. Anything is fine. We've got reviews. If you click the About page, if you're on your phone right now, can you do me a favor? Okay, so if you're not driving, open your phone, go to the show page, and then on the About section, you'll see like the rating and reviewing. If you hit the star furthest to the right, or if you're in Japan, the star furthest to the left, and then you can give us 5 stars on there. Our attempt is to beat out the Gottman's podcast, because who even likes those people? I mean, they're the foremost researchers of marriage, but I mean, really, they don't need to have as many 5-star reviews on their podcast as they have. So beat the Gottmans. That's a figure of speech. I think that's it. I hope that this was, I felt a little ranty today, so I hope that it was helpful. I hope that it was beneficial. I'm not imagining that this is really a problem in our audience, but I did have a little bit of fun talking about it and ranting about it, because I have these really strong feelings, and sometimes I don't have anywhere to put them. So I'm putting them right here. I'm giving them to you, and I hope you enjoyed them. Awesome. Good night. Have a good night, everybody. Bye, everybody.
When I got everything, I got you and me. All I want, I got all I need.
Is that when you have sexual contact with someone, your brain releases oxytocin, and your brain releases vasopressin. Let's try that again. Not pulsating. What is that thing that like you drip in the pond and then it